This is a talk called The Future of Agile, and I am, unfortunately for you, going to hijack this talk and tell you that my talk, The Future of Agile, is online. And the Future of Agile is not the rational unified process, by the way, despite the fact what the Agile unified process would have you believe. Everything that I will talk about this evening is about Agile. But I want to talk about one specific part of Agile that most people don't talk about. If you want to know more about methodology and the evolution of methodologies and how they interact and why it is that people fail with Agile, then there's another talk online called Agile Considered Harmful. And if you Google Agile Considered Harmful, it's about fourth down on the list. And if you add Sleepy Fox to it, you'll hit it first time. So, who is Sleepy Fox? Well, me, obviously. My name's Nigel. Most people know me as Sleepy Fox in the London Agile and developer communities. I'm an Agile coach and software craftsman, and I've been doing this for a rather long time. Since before it was called Agile, in fact. When it was called RUP, in case you hadn't noticed earlier. I run the London Code Dojo, which is BDD, beer-driven development, where programmers come together and program with pizza and beer. And I run a software consultancy. I was programming since age 10 on a computer that looked like this. Well, okay, not really. It was a computer that looked like this. This is a Commodore PET 2001. Anyone programmed an 8-bit computer like a Commodore PET? Yeah, a few people in the room. Excellent. So who here contributes to open source in any way? A few hands. Who uses open source? Most hands in the room. So what did open source look like in those days? It looked like this. This is Computer and Video Games magazine. It was a magazine filled full of program listings that were almost always basic. Now, who's programmed in BASIC? Lots of hands, and more people than I was expecting. Would you want to program in BASIC again? No. Indentation? Pa. Modules? Pa. Procedures, functions? They're for wimps. Objects? Well, Björn Strustrup didn't publish his book until later the same year that episode of Computer and Video Games magazine was from. TDD is still more than a decade away at this point. So what did you do? You typed it all in. You pray that it worked. And of course it never did. So you debugged, and you debugged, and you debugged. And this is what debugging looks like in BASIC. So that was the old days. And this is what I spent my time working on, the Hubble Space Telescope. I was an astrophysics graduate, and I spent my time writing the software that streams information from the collector to the antenna. This was written in 6502 assembly code. This is not the Hubble X-ray polarimetry detector code. This is completely different 6502 assembly code that's used for dividing. Because if you wanted to divide two numbers, this is a little bit of a segue from Uncle Bob's talk 2 weeks ago. If you wanted to divide two numbers, you had to write a program to do it. So that's my background. 8-bit assembler. So this is a book that shares absolutely nothing with this talk, apart from its title. Let me tell you why you are here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you felt it your entire working life. That there's something wrong with the world of management. You don't know what it is, but it's there like a splinter in your mind. You want to know the truth? We are slaves. Like everyone else around you, you have been employed into a prison that you cannot taste or see or touch. A prison for your mind. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Who here would like a better manager? About half the people in the room. You're not alone. Stats show that 1 out of every 4 employees report that their boss is the worst and most stressful part of their work. 65% of employees said they would rather have a new boss than a pay rise. Let's think about that for a second. What is wrong with these managers? Why can't they understand what it is that we do? Well, the answer to this has to do with memes. We all know about memes, right? A meme is a mind virus. A lolcat is a meme. A backwards baseball cap is a meme. And every slide deck of mine has at least one lolcat in it. But there are evil memes. Who here studied computer science? Who here thinks that what they do today is like the computer science they studied? Maybe one. I'll talk to you later. So, this guy, Edgar Dijkstra, one of the giants of our industry, and the father of modern design principles, the author of the paper Go-To Statement Considered Harmful, wrote, "Computer science is no more about computers than astronomy is about telescopes." And he was onto something. Computer science is not a science. Now that's a contentious statement. So let me prove that statement. Give me a science. Anyone? Physics. Yes, physics. Absolutely a science. I think everyone agrees on that. Anyone disagree that physics is a science? No, didn't think so. Another science, anyone? Who thinks that social science is actually a science? Right, the laughs, I think, prove that one. So, science is chemistry, biology, physics. Those are sciences. Political science, social science. They're not sciences. If they were sciences, they wouldn't need to add science into the name, right? It's obvious. The problem comes with the scientific method. Construct a hypothesis, construct an experiment to prove or disprove the hypothesis, collect data, analyze the data, look at the results. But you cannot apply the scientific method to social systems because the people who are your experiment are changing and no two groups of people are the same. So to compensate for the fact that you can't actually use the scientific method, instead you use statistics. And we'll come back to that later. So if software is not actually computer science, what else could it be? Let's look at another evil meme. Software engineering. Who here is a software engineer by title? A few people. Do you actually have engineering certifications? Okay. From which country? It's not quite the same. Are you a certified engineer? No. Okay. Anyone a certified engineer? In any discipline, software or anything else? Samir, really? Okay. One. This is an interesting area because engineering has some fairly rigorous qualifications and a certification process to go through because it's expected that engineers do things like build buildings, and you don't want your building to crash and have to reboot it because people die. And as a consequence, engineers have to be certified by a governing body which is trusted by the government in order to prove that, in actual fact, they're responsible and capable enough to do stuff without killing people. At a NATO conference in Garmisch in Germany, high-ranking government and military officials discuss why projects run over budget, over time, software is inefficient and of low quality, it doesn't often meet requirements, the projects are unmanageable, code is difficult to maintain, and software sometimes is just never delivered at all. This conference was in 1968. This was the start of software engineering. And, of course, today, software is reliable and dependable and all sorts of other words ending in "ible." Software engineering has cured all of our ills. No, it hasn't, has it? And the reason that it hasn't is because software is not engineering. Because engineering works with known materials whose properties remain constant over time. And software deals with constructs of the mind that are flexible and whose properties vary over time. Hence, software rather than hardware. As a consequence, we cannot apply the discipline of engineering to software and get the same results that we have done with civil engineering, with chemical engineering, with electrical engineering. Now let's go to another meme. This guy is Frederick Winslow Taylor. Who here has read this book? It's a very short book and is thoroughly worthwhile reading. The Principles of Scientific Management. This is the foundation of management. This book was printed in 1911. It's more than 100 years old. This book marked the start of general management as a discipline. The first MBA was offered by Harvard in 1908. And the background for this was the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution saw the replacement of cottage industries with factories. It saw the division of people into two different kinds. There were the people who think and the people who work. And this is very important. People like Frederick Winslow Taylor argued that it is the responsibility of the people who think to produce a system that will enable the people who work to work efficiently. It is not the responsibility of the people who work. It is the responsibility of the people who think. And this distinction, this bipartisan approach to pulling apart a single group into two different groups, management and workers, is something that has profoundly affected our society. The main problem at the turn of the 20th century was how to feed and clothe the world. We have the resources and the production capacity to feed and clothe the world. The only reason that there are people in poverty right now is political. It has nothing to do with manufacturing capability or resources. General management was designed to produce efficient factories. Our educational system was designed to produce people who have the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. People who can read orders, do the orders, write the numbers on timesheets and add them up properly, who can do the basic tasks in order to apply what the system of management is telling them to do. But we are not unskilled workers. We are not plug-compatible units. We are not commodities. And this is what makes us different from factory workers. Something different has happened. There is a fundamental difference between factory workers and knowledge workers. And the fundamental difference there is the repetitive tasks are the ones that we don't do anymore. The machines do them. Compilers, linkers, automated test suites, deployment applications like Puppet or Chef. These are the workers. We are the thinkers. We tell the workers what to do. But if we're doing the thinking, what are management doing? This is a slide from Stephen Denning's keynote in 2011. And what he's looking at here is something that Clayton Christensen wrote about in The Innovator's Prescription, about the outsourcing death spiral. And what he's saying is that by pursuing short-term profits, we engage foreign outsourcing. This results in a loss of knowledge, an inability to innovate, cost-cutting, an inability to compete, and eventually corporate death. Let me give you an example. Who knows the story of Dell and Asus Tech? Anyone? Oh, excellent. It'll be something new then. So Asus Tech now make computers. But 10 years or so ago, they were a small manufacturer who produced, I believe, Wi-Fi cards for Dell. Now, they went to Dell and they said, you guys are making graphics cards. We can produce graphics cards for you 20% cheaper than you can do it yourself. And Dell went, oh, okay, that sounds like a good deal. Dell made money, Asus Tech made money, shareholders were happy. Asus Tech went back to Dell and said, you know what, we can make the motherboard for you 20% cheaper than you can do it yourself. And Dell went, oh, okay, that sounds good, we'll do that. More money, everyone happy, shareholders happy. Then the assembly of the computer, then the management of the supply chain, and finally the actual design of the computers was outsourced to Asus Tech. Next time Asus Tech came back, it wasn't to Dell. They came back to Best Buy and said, hey guys, we can produce a computer 20% cheaper than you can get one from Dell. Oops. Dell had created their own competitor by following this cycle. They had offshored the process, and in offshoring the process, they'd offshored the knowledge of how to innovate, and they had lost their main competitive advantage in the market. Anyone know about the Peter Principle? Few hands. So the Peter Principle was written about in the 60s. In 1969, Dr. Lawrence J. Peter wrote a book called The Peter Principle, and basically he argued that there was a good reason why managers are rubbish. And that is that generally at those times you started out at the bottom levels of an organization, and if you did a good job you were promoted. And then you were moved to a different area maybe, and you did that job, and you did well, and you were promoted, and you kept on being promoted until you were promoted into management. And that was tough then, because you knew all about how to do the work, but you didn't really know anything about managing people. But, nevertheless, you were a self-starter, and you were motivated, and you were a go-getter, and somehow you managed to make it work. And you did a good job, and you were promoted. And you continued doing a good job and were promoted until things were just too tough, and you weren't really doing a good job anymore, and then, well, then you didn't get promoted anymore. And this, he basically argued, is the reason why the vast majority of middle management in any organization is rubbish, because they've all been promoted to their level of incompetence, and now they're no longer doing a good job, so they're not promoted anymore. Now, this was an excellent model for the kind of organizations that you worked in for life. But times changed. And as a consequence, Scott Adams, the author of the Dilbert strip, proposed that there was a new model at play. When someone comes into an organization, you ask what it is that they're good at and where they will best fit. Are they technical? Can they make stuff? Okay, well, we'll put them in engineering. Are they good at talking to people, convincing people, selling stuff? Okay, we'll put them in sales and marketing. Can they add up? Okay, we'll put them in finance. Can they do none of the above, but have really great hair? Okay, we'll move them to the position where they can do the least damage. Management. Sadly, this has not proved to be the winning strategy that we might have thought it would have been. So, Scott Adams, in the Dilbert Principle, says that the difference between the Peter Principle and the modern way of dealing with management is you just promote MBAs. You just pull them in straight into the middle and higher echelons of management. And the reason that you can do this is because an MBA course teaches you about how to manage an organization. And really, any organization is the same as any other organization, really. Yes? Does anybody actually believe that? No, we don't believe it. So, a while back, I worked on the National Programme for IT, the £22 billion IT disaster that was the NHS's IT revitalisation programme. Anybody else worked on Connecting for Health and National Programme for IT? Couple of hands. When I started on that project, there were 19 levels of management above me. I could not figure that out. What was going on? Now, in times of old, when knights were bold, we had large command and control based hierarchies. And the reason for this is that it made sense. Transaction costs for communication were incredibly high. If you wanted to send a message to your counterpart in a city, perhaps over the border in a nearby country, you had to write the message on paper, seal it up, give it to a messenger, and then hope that he would get there as he rode on his horse over the hills and far away, and you hoped that, you know, he wasn't killed in a border skirmish between rival lords or seduced by a spy who worked for a competing organization. The only sensible coping strategy for organizations that spanned countries was a command and control based organization that was hierarchical and that accounted for the extremely high transaction cost of communication. And pretty much everything, from armies to the Roman Catholic Church, adopted this model. Modern businesses are a bit different. This is the inside of the cabin of an Airbus A340. A sight that we've all seen, or similar. But inside the cockpit looks like this. It's full of computers. It's a fly-by-wire aircraft. And what that means is that if the computers go down, so does the aircraft. My software engineering professor at university said, that there was no way on earth he would ever fly in an Airbus. All successful businesses now, I would argue, are fly-by-wire. Because there is no manual process that you can revert to. If the software stops working, you can't start doing it all over the phones and with paper. As Mark Andreessen said, software is eating the world. The world's largest direct marketer is Google. The world's largest bookseller is Amazon. The world's largest shoe retailer is Zappos, which is now Amazon. The world's largest video entertainment provider, Netflix. The world's largest photo company, now no longer Kodak, Flickr. The world's largest music distributor, iTunes, Apple, yes. The world's, not quite the world's largest, but getting there, and certainly the world's fastest growing telecoms provider, Skype, yes. The world's largest recruitment agency. Sorry? LinkedIn, yes. The reason that these companies have dominated their market segments is not because they are really great at doing traditionally what companies do to dominate. They're better at marketing, they're better at PR, they're better at branding, they produce a better quality product, they have more efficient supply chain management, The reason that these companies have dominated their market segments is because they are better at software. All of these companies are now software companies. Did anyone go to the Netflix talk on Cassandra that was early this year, late last year, at the Cassandra Group? Absolutely fascinating talk about how Netflix uses Cassandra to manage their big data problems. Netflix, you've got to remember this, Netflix now accounts for 25% of the traffic, internet traffic in the US. These are the guys that were mailing DVDs through your postbox 5 years ago. Now they are one of the most sophisticated IT companies in the world. Imagine for a second what Harry Potter would have been like if I had more hair. Blimey, Harry, don't you ever wonder where your mum and dad learned it all? Learned what? You're a programmer, Harry. I'm a what? A programmer and a thumping good un, I'd wager, once you've trained up a little. We are wizards. Think about that for a moment. We speak an arcane language that nobody else understands. We command the spirits in the machines to do our bidding. We bend them to our will. We are wizards. What does that make managers? So, what have the managers ever done for us? What do managers do? Who here is or has been a manager? Couple of hands, go up, don't be afraid. We're not going to eat you. Yet. What do managers do in traditional command and control organizations? Well, they roll up team members' status reports to management above them. They cascade down executive information from the levels of management above them. They hire new team members, they do employee appraisals and reviews, sort out compensation. But really, think about that for a second. With the transaction cost of information being so low, if you need management information from the executive to cascade down, just email distribution to everybody, or a podcast or a video cast from the executive leadership to tell you about the new direction the company is taking. You don't need a management cascade. The work that we do is, I don't know, how many people work with any kind of time tracking or work tracking system, whether it's, Jira, or even whether it's just spreadsheets or an agile tracking tool, or so I don't know, that's 80% of the people in the room, maybe more. These tools are perfectly capable of providing data for a dashboard for executive management to see exactly what's going on throughout the organization on all of the IT development projects and assess quite easily whether they're to plan, ahead of plan, or behind plan. We don't need managers to roll up status reports. So managers hire new team members. Well, I don't know about you, but I'd much rather have my team hire new team members than have a manager try and do it for us. That usually, in my experience, doesn't work out too well. And employee appraisals and reviews, I'd much rather that was a 360 process and done by my peers than one person who is subject to bias doing it. So we don't need managers for those things. So what have managers done for organizations? In particular, what has MBA-style management done for organizations? Surely it must be successful, right? I mean, that's why there are so many of them. This is a slide from a report by McKinsey called Creative Destruction. And what it shows is the return on investment, or the return on invested capital during the years 1965 to 2009. And what you can see is that it starts around 5% in 1965. And it drops continuously until we get to the figures end in 2009, when the report was produced. And the report shows that the average there, 1.2, 1.3%. That is, or was certainly then, below the rate of inflation, the real rate of inflation produced by basket of goods. Now, what that's telling you is that the average company is losing money. And it's not just because the economy is poor. When you look at the trend line over the past 40 or more years, companies have steadily been doing worse and worse and worse and worse. And the reason why we'll come on to in a second. So this is the average company lifespan on the Standard & Poor 500 index. So what you can see here is that although let's see whether that stabilizes. Seem to have a bit of a problem with this. Don't know whether it's... I'm guessing it's one of the connections. So what you can see from this is that the trend is that over time, the lifespan of a large corporation being on the Standard & Poor 500 index is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And basically the large corporation exits the Standard & Poor 500 index when it's no longer doing well, either because it's been acquired by another company or because it's basically in the process of dying. Now, if I was the CEO of a company and my return on investment of invested capital was less than the rate of inflation, I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't be lasting very long as a CEO. The shareholders would want to do something about it. Now, what we can see here is this is the expected lifespan of a large corporation. And this is the rate of return on assets. This is worker compensation adjusted for inflation. That's us, by the way. This, however, is executive compensation as compared to the average worker salary. Now, I don't know about you, but something there just doesn't add up. I'm not really quite sure what's going on. But the end result of this is that there's only one possible fate for an underperforming company. The realization that you're no longer a big fish in a small pond, or even a small fish in a big pond, but a small fish in a big fish. So what we're seeing here is nothing less than the death of the dinosaurs. We're looking at a global business extinction event. And you know what? This is a good thing. This is a wonderful time for the small creatures of the business world, the SMEs, who are more agile, who can adapt faster, who can exploit the market, and who can do things without the overhead of management that large corporations have. So what is the future of management in an agile process? Max Planck said, "A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it." It was William Gibson who said, "The future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed." And what I'd say is, it's the same here. The future is already here. It's just that some of the large corporations don't know they're dead yet. We're seeing the dawn of a new age of business. So, I give you a rallying cry. Liberté, égalité, technology! Vive la révolution! I know they're out there. I know they're afraid. They're afraid of us. They're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to finish this presentation now. I've shown you what managers did not want you to see. I've shown you a world without them. A world without stupid rules and controls, without bureaucracy or bottlenecks. A world where anything is possible. And where we go from here is a choice I leave to you. Thank you. Now, I actually hoped that we'd start a bit sooner so we'd have more time for discussion. This is deliberately provocative. Well, I could start by learning how to code.
That sounds dangerous. Probably they will spend the rest of their life on their yachts. Yeah?
Well, certainly the executive managers can, with that 275 times worker salary compensation. And I think that's probably a good thing, if we can get them out of our way, so that we can actually start producing things that customers want. I'm not an advocate of shooting all managers, just to be clear. I used to be, but that was a long time ago when I was a hot-headed youth. I think what we lack is not managers, but leaders. Tom DeMarco, in his book Slack, talks a lot about the problems of modern management. And one of the things he says is there's a good reason why most managers are rubbish and why they're not effective leaders. And it's a very, very simple one. Because it's very, very easy to manage and appear to be leading. If when you go and start working for an organization and you see that there is a gradual drift in this direction, You say, I have a new corporate strategy. We will go this way. It's safe, right? Everybody's going that way already. It appears successful. And the reason they do this is because leadership is hard. Management by continental drift is easy. You just tell people to do what they were already doing. We don't need managers that do that. What we need are leaders with vision who can turn businesses around, who can produce things that customers actually want and need. Any questions? More questions? Topics for discussion? Argue with me vehemently.
Question for the rest of the group, which is, would people prefer no managers or better managers?
Okay, so why don't we do a straw poll? Hands up for no managers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-ish, 9, 10, maybe, something like that. Hands up for better managers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 45, 16. Okay, so about 3 to 1-ish in favour of better managers over no managers. Okay, so middle, hands up for fewer better managers. And I suspect that we're going to add up to more than 100% when we do this. Yeah.
You can also ask me as a manager, so probably many hands would like to be in this 270.
I don't think anybody, and I speak for myself here, actually having been a manager, I don't think anybody who is a manager actually tries to do a bad job. Yeah? What I do think, and Deming has a lot to say about this, is that it is the system that determines 95% of the employee's performance, and the employee makes up the other 5%. And that's a foundational piece of systems thinking, is you can't swim upstream very far, salmons notwithstanding. Mostly, your performance is down to the system that you're in, the environment that you're in. And if you really want to change your performance, then you need to change the environment. And managers tend to manage tasks, or manage people, or manage projects, or sometimes manage risk, or programs, or manage governance. But very few managers actually understand or are capable of managing systems. And this is not their fault, it's just because they don't know any better. And that's part of our industry maturing. We've only been doing this 50 years, right? Other industries, law, politics, medicine, architecture, are hundreds if not thousands of years old. We've only had 60 odd. We've got a long way to go. You know, this is the wild, wild west here that we're talking about. We're pioneers, we're trailblazers, we're wizards. We're alchemists. It is all new and strange and different, and nobody really knows what the rules are yet. And that makes it exciting, because it means that we can have an impact that generations on from us will reap the rewards of.
Maybe the graph is falling down because 5% that there are more software companies in this opposite of the traditional companies. The software spoils the graph.
So you're saying that, let's flick back to that. So, there, this one. So you're saying that there are more software companies, and that's actually what's bringing it down. That's because we're doing a really bad job.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like your thought extending the...
So because software is eating the world, and because all companies to be successful now need to master software, You're now saying because software is hard, that's why companies are doing much more poorly than perhaps they were previously in times gone by when we weren't so reliant on software. You may have a very good point there.
One interesting question would be, is the number of companies taken into account there? Is there the same amount of money being made by a much larger number of companies? Therefore, each has a smaller percentage return on investment? Or is that the graph?
The top left is the rate of return on assets, so that's actually per company. So that's individual companies, and then the rates are amortized. So so you're looking at the budget effectively. You're looking at the total amount of money in the marketplace, and then saying what are the demographics of companies? Well, no, that doesn't show that. That just shows for each company what is their rate of return on investment, and then it's a mean. So what you're getting is the average rate of return on investment for a company, as opposed to a view of the whole market. So what you could say there is that you've got a few on the far end of the curve that are actually making all of the money. Or it could be that you would be saying that the market as a whole is making a lot less money, and as a consequence, so you can't tell the difference from those figures. But one would argue that the economy has wavered, but still when you look at GDP, then the economic growth of the entire market is still growing as a net positive gain. I mean, when you look at GDP figures, you don't see them doing this and continuing to go down. You know, there are blips in them, but the overall trend line is still positive.
Or if you just have more companies all taking a slice, the slice gets divided up, so the return for the individual company gets smaller and smaller.
It would do if that was if this graph was their portion of the whole, but instead this is each individual company's rate of return on investment. So it's out of the money that I've spent, how much have I got back? Sorry?
What about ownership terms? Because right now a lot of companies belong to nobody really. Shareholders who are like pension funds who belong to other shareholders, which means that at the top we have just managers on their own.
At the top we have just managers.
Yes, managers decide how to keep money.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. You're saying so that it's effectively.
So effectively it's all capital.
You're saying that absent shareholders, because the shareholders aren't real shareholders, they're just pension funds, and because the vast majority of the wealth, the ownership of capital of companies actually is through things like, is through pension funds essentially, that the shareholders aren't actually driving the company. Because they're not involved, and instead it's managers and executives who are driving the company. Yes, absolutely. They're incentivized for short-term value, and Steve Denning writes about this in Forbes, and is an article called Shareholder Value, the single most stupid idea in the world. And he has some very good points.
Startups by their own nature tend to be companies without or with very little money. There isn't enough money to pay someone to do nothing. Do you think there's going to be an explosion in startups?
Do I think there's going to be an explosion in startups in the future because startups don't have the overhead of management? I think we're already seeing that. I think the world is such, and the barriers to entry are now so low, and the friction in the marketplace of what's required to actually set up a company is the lowest it's ever been. So, I think we're seeing this already.
Those reasons would then also explain that graph, right? Because if you have many startups, they're overtaking the established companies without no rights, and also more competitive market, which means lower return on investment.
Perhaps.
What you also see is a lot
So I've got a little thing here saying that time's up. Thank you all very much. It's been lovely having you here, and I'm really happy that it wasn't just me and one other person in the room, as we talked about at the beginning. All of the slides will be online, and I've already given the slides to the audiovisual person at the back, and we should see them shortly. My copies of the slides will be up on Speaker Deck shortly, and if you Google for Speaker Deck and Sleepy Fox, you'll find them. Thank you very much, everyone.